Hey everyone, Susan Storm here, and today I want to get into the types of intelligence that each of the 16 personality types have. You'll often see articles online talking about the most intelligent personality types, or you'll look at Reddit forums where people are debating which types are the most intelligent. And the way I think about it, it's like telling a fish, we're going to judge your skill and ability by how well you can climb a tree. I think there's even a famous quote about that by someone famous. I think that each of the 16 personality types has a unique form of intelligence. And if we go on debating which one is the most intelligent or the least, what we're really talking about is which animal is really good at swimming versus which is really fast at running. The skills that each personality type has, they're each completely different. And so we need all of those skills and all of those different forms of intelligence in the world around us. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I want to start by talking about the sensing, perceiving personality types, the SPs. If you're an ESFP, an ESTP, an ISFP, or an ISTP, then you are an extroverted sensing type. Even if you're an introvert, you still use a process called extroverted sensing. And extroverted sensing is all about understanding and absorbing the world and the facts around you in real time. Extroverted sensing types have a type of intelligence called tactical intelligence. This type of intelligence is very focused on what's happening in the present moment and can adjust and innovate in the moment to make the best out of a situation, particularly crisis situations. You might find that in a crisis situation, an intuitive type might get stuck in their head trying to theorize about how things are going to play out, whereas a sensing perceiving type is going to be very tapped into what exactly is happening right now, what resources are at your disposal, and problem solving on the fly. Sensing perceivers are really good at reading the room, at tuning into those subtle nuances that a lot of other people miss. They have practical smarts, street smarts. They learn through trial and error. They learn through experimentation. They're not afraid to take risks. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty in order to learn through real life and practical experiences how something works and how to improve, how to come up with solutions. You'll find that certain types, they want to practice, 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 or they want to theorize, 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 or they want to think, think, think. Sensing perceiver types, they're going to generally learn by doing. They're kinesthetic, hands-on learners. And so what you'll find with them is that maybe their first try at something, it isn't the most elegant, but the fact is they keep trying and trying until they have this really incredible solution or really incredible practice. And they know exactly what works and what doesn't work through that real life experience rather than forming thought experiments in their own head. Sensing perceivers are really amazing at reacting instantly to real world data, to what's happening around them. I've been on vacation before with intuitives and with sensing perceivers. They're so aware of every sight, sound, event going on around them. They're constantly attuned to that. And so they notice all of these details that the intuitive types don't notice because the intuitive types are busy talking about a concept. The sensing perceivers, in contrast, they're engaging with the world. And that is a unique form of intelligence. This helps them to spot things that other people miss. It helps them to walk into a room and know exactly what's going on or what's exactly might be off if there's a threat in the vicinity. It can also make them really good at things like negotiating because they can read people's body language really well and they can adjust to that on the fly without a whole lot of preparation. Also, sensing perceiver types tend to have a really accurate recall of facts. If you were at a crime scene and you wanted a witness, you would want to talk to a sensing perceiver because they would recall way more details than many other types would recall, and they would do it without imbuing a lot of personal subjective interpretation onto it. They tend to see the world as it is for what it is without trying to project their own feelings or theories onto it. They try to be as realistic as possible. So this very realistic, practical, perceptive intelligence really makes sensing perceiving types stand out. As far as how you might see this in careers, I've seen sensing perceivers excel in artistic and creative fields where they can use that heightened awareness of sensory detail and aesthetics to create art, to create beautiful food, to create music. So many creative avenues where I've seen sensing perceivers express themselves. I've also seen this in really high pressure career fields like working the stock market or being a surgeon, situations where they have to think quickly on their feet. A lot of other types would freeze up or they'd feel really nervous in those high pressure situations where every minute counts, every second counts. Whereas sensing perceivers, especially ESPs, tend to really thrive in those situations. I've known ESFPs who are really good at branding. They're really good at event coordinating. They tend to know exactly how to create an amazing experience for people. And this can show up in marketing and it can show up in wedding planning. They know all the details and they know how to arrange them just right to give people the best possible experience because sensing perceivers are all about experience. Some people call them the experiencers because they're all about maximizing the moment and making it as immersive and enjoyable as possible. Next, let's talk about extroverted intuitive types. These are the NP personality types: ENFPs, ENTPs, INFPs, and INTPs. These types use a process called extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition can make these mental leaps to find connections between things that might seem disparate or random to other people. This can make them really good at solving mysterious problems or finding clues that other people might have missed. They're also good at brainstorming possibilities when the tried and true solutions are failing. If you're used to doing everything by the book and then all of a sudden the world is changing and you have to adjust very quickly, that can be really hard for certain personality types. But for NPs, that's their wheelhouse. They do their best work when they can adjust on the fly and learn and grow and improvise to ever-changing situations. They're very creative, they're very ingenious, they're good at thinking outside the box and coming up with innovative solutions. These are the people that, if you're in a board meeting and everyone's throwing out ideas, they're the people who are probably going to come up with the most ideas. And yes, some of them might be half-baked, but there is some magic. There usually throughout the process, they might throw out 30 ideas and 15 suck, but then there's 15 that are cool and maybe one that's absolutely incredible. So you have to let them go through that brainstorming process to find the real magic, to find the gem there. So these types, they're really good at dealing with, like I said, with chaos, with unexpected situations, with change, with evolution. So these are the types that you want in jobs that require that sort of resilience and that innovative ability. You often find ENTPs in jobs like tech startups, Silicon Valley type jobs, legal strategy, troubleshooting with new technologies. You'll often find ENFPs and ENTPs or even INPs really interested in entrepreneurship, where they don't have that security blanket of being part of a corporate structure. They are kind of free falling on their own and figuring out as they go, but they do really well in that situation. Futurism, any kind of like forecasting how things are going to go, science, research. NPs love exploring the unknown. They love exploring anything novel, anything that hasn't been discovered before. So often find them in careers doing things that have never been done, researching concepts or theories that have never been researched before, writing about things that have never been written about before. I know so many INFPs who enjoy writing fiction, who create worlds that have never been created before, and they aren't even copying something that's already been created. So creativity, ingenuity, innovation, thinking on your feet, being able to change and roll with changes, these are all skills of the extroverted, intuitive, NP personality types. Next, let's look at the SJ types that use a process called introverted sensing. If you are an ESFJ, ESTJ, ISFJ, or ISTJ, then you use a process called introverted sensing. And introverted sensing has a knack for comparing past experiences to present experiences and knowing what's the same and what's different. It's also really good at noticing what works in the past and then reapplying that to present and future situations. Introverted sensing also put subjective meaning on things so that it can remember things based on their personal meaning that they infused into something. For example, they might be really interested in the different types of trees in the forest, but the way that they remember the specific types of trees is they associating specific memories to those trees. Like, I know that this is a specific type of pine because this pine smells exactly like the Christmas tree that we always got when I was a kid growing up. So I remember that. And I remember that this is a specific type of apple tree because these apples are the ones that I remember using for apple pie when I made apple pies with my grandma. They will always remember the associations that they have with details and with facts and with reality. And so those memories and those associations help them to recall information and solidify that information in their mind so that they can use it again in the future. So introverted sensing types are really good at remembering what worked before and then applying it in this very precise way in the present. They're good at keeping stability alive, at keeping a sense of continuity alive. They're good at learning through repetition and practice. They're very careful, they're very thorough, they're very methodical. And so they don't tend to just wing it like the perceiving types we've just talked about. Instead, they like to practice, practice, practice so that if they're talking about something or if they're working on something, a skill, they have learned it inside and out. You know that if you're working with an SJ, they're very careful. They've probably worked on this to an excruciating degree that would drive many perceiving types absolutely bonkers. They have a heightened awareness of details. They notice immediately when something is off, when something's missing, or when something is needed. This is often why you'll see ISTJs in careers as tax auditors or accountants. They're really good at managing all those details and remembering the specifics and being able to keep it organized in their mind. Whereas for someone like me who uses introverted intuition, I would start losing all those concrete details as I was going, and it would be really messy for me. Also, you also find many SJs working in healthcare. I know so many SJs who work as doctors, as nurses, as radiologists, people who have to be really careful that all the details are in the exact correct order, that messing up one tiny detail as a nurse can mean life or death for a patient. So SJs are the people you want when you need someone who's going to be very careful, who's going to be very precise, who's going to remember the facts and details, and who's going to double check or triple check that everything is done absolutely correctly. These are the people who are really good at memorizing, at remembering the details, and working through them over and over again to make sure that they have 100% expertise in that field. One thing I will say is that I believe sensors often have a really strong form of what's called naturalist intelligence. This form of intelligence is very concerned with understanding and working with plants and living things. It requires a strong attention to detail and a focus on the natural concrete world around you. Being able to spot those tiny little nuances that could mean something like, oh, this plant isn't getting enough nitrogen, or this tree is not getting enough sunlight, and being able to spot those little nuances and work with them. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is also an area where you'll often see sensors shine. It's all about timing, coordination, and mind-body harmony. These are all areas where sensors can really shine. When it comes to intuitives, you'll often find that they have a gift for what's called existential intelligence. They tend to have a gift for comprehending deep and meaningful questions like, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? Why do we die? How do we get here? This is the type of intelligence that you often find used by philosophers, spiritualists, poets, or even sometimes futurists. While all types can be skilled at this form of intelligence, intuitive types tend to show a stronger preference for this. Intuitives just are naturally wired to consider these big existential questions. Now let's talk about the intuitive judging types, the INTJs, the INFJs, ENTJs, and ENFJs. So when it comes to these types, they have a skill for finding patterns, noticing ripple effects, seeing where, when you do this thing now, how it's going to play out 5 years from now. Introverted intuition, which is the process that NJs use, it's all about reading between the lines and finding out what's the ripple effects of something will be. What's the long-term implication? What can we predict based on what we know now? It's also interested in what's going on that isn't immediately obvious, whereas sensing functions are primarily concerned with what is real and observable. Intuitive functions, particularly introverted intuition, is very concerned with what isn't seen, what isn't tangible, what isn't concrete. That's what introverted intuition really cares about. It's less concerned about the tree itself than what the tree means for the future, or what the tree could symbolize. As things become more and more concrete, intuition tends to get more and more detached from the idea. INFJs, INTJs, ENFJs, ENTJs, they want things to become a bigger picture. The bigger the picture, the more exciting it is. The more abstract, the more exciting it is. Whereas for sensing types, the more real and immediate something is, the more interesting it is. Introverted intuitives are really good at noticing a subtle shift in behavior and then comprehending why did that shift occur. They're really good at getting a meta perspective on things, like getting outside of their own perspective and trying to see all the other perspectives at play in a situation. They're good at strategy, at playing the long game, at giving up immediate pleasures and experiences in order to get a better longer term result. Sometimes this results in them always kicking satisfaction down the road because they're always thinking ahead where it's hard for them to be in the moment. But at their best, they can future forecast and create an incredible outcome later. So introverted intuitives can be really good at counseling because they're good at understanding the implications of what led someone to a particular situation in life and what they might need to do or implement in order to change that. They're also good at seeing those different perspectives, so that can give them a gift in counseling. They're good at strategy. Any job that involves strategy is really stimulating for them and something that they really enjoy, particularly NTJs especially love any kind of business strategy or organizational development, things like that. NFJs really strong when it comes to counseling, spiritual mentorship, creative work. I've known many INFJ psychologists and therapists who've written books about how people are affected by different events and life experiences and what they can do about it, how they can deal with things like codependency or generational trauma. They're willing to really get inside their clients' experiences and learn from those, not just on a one-off situational basis, but for how they can use what they're learning to really improve life for many people. So yeah, with NJs, you'll often find that they're good at pattern recognition, they're good at predicting, they're good at strategy, they're good at insight. You'll find them excelling in careers like psychologists, strategists, data science, system analysis, research, so many things. So now we've gone over all the perceiving functions, right? Intuition and sensing, and both forms of intuition and both forms of sensing. Now let's look at intelligence when it comes to the different judging functions. And the judging functions are thinking and feeling. Let's start by talking about extroverted thinking. Extroverted thinking is all about really organizing the chaos of the world around you into something workable in order to achieve specific objectives and goals. It's interested in evidence, empirical logic, objectivity, measurable progress. Extroverted thinking types are very concerned with metrics, with return on investment, with what ultimately works in order to get something done. To them, what's logical is what works. So extroverted thinking types are really good at noticing immediately what's going to work, what's not going to work. They're really good at creating effective systems and creating order out of chaos. When it comes to execution, TJ types are the ones that you really want on your team. If you have a project and you need to get it done fast, you want a TJ by your side to help you organize all the moving parts into a coherent system and a coherent flow. They're very firm-minded. They try to stay as unbiased as possible so that their decision-making is as clear as possible. They tend to focus on things like grades in school. That really is important and matters to them. External measures of success really matter to TJ types because extroverted thinking is all about external output, external results. It's ultimately about what works. And a grade is just an external measure of success, an external letter that says, here's how good you're doing. And TJs really care about that kind of thing. Next, let's look at introverted thinking. Introverted thinking is the function that ENTPs, ESTPs, INTPs, and INTPs use. Introverted thinking is less focused on external measures of success, and it's more about what makes sense to me. It's ultimately concerned with truth and accuracy and deconstructing systems and to find internal logical consistency. So it's less about results and getting the output someone wants, and it's more about understanding the system itself. I always say if you give a new iPhone to extroverted thinking type, they're going to immediately try to figure out how to use it to do what they need to do. Like, how can I organize my calendar? How can I get my productivity apps to work properly, etc. Whereas if you give a new iPhone to someone like a thinking perceiver type, they're going to be interested in what's the hardware like? What are the changes? How does this thing work? They might feel tempted to just take it apart and deconstruct it or watch videos about all the little details of the new iPhone. For the introverted thinking type, it's all about understanding all the moving parts of how something works. Whereas for an extroverted thinking type, it's just about using the thing. Now, there is a distinction I want to make here. The STP types, they're interested in particularly tangible objects. They're interested in knowing how a motorcycle engine works. My husband is an ESTP and he knows all about small engine mechanics and small engine repair. And he loves learning about that stuff or building computers and things like that and knowing how each little piece works. STPs are not quite as interested in deconstructing abstract ideas. They're more interested in deconstructing real things that have a real world impact. Now, that said, ISTPs, they can be a little bit more interested in something abstract because they do have introverted intuition in their function stack in the third position. We're not going to get all into that because lead down a whole rabbit trail, and that could be left for another video. But STPs in general are more interested in understanding how concrete things work, how real things work. NTPs are much more interested in understanding how theories, ideas, belief systems, and concepts work. So With an NTP, you might get someone who's really interested in understanding all the nuances of evolution, or they might be interested in understanding all the nuances of psychology or how the political system works. It's got to be very big picture and almost abstract, whereas they might not be as interested in taking apart a computer and putting it back together again. Obviously, there's exceptions, but as a general sense, this often seems to be true. Whereas I've known so many NTPs who can really get into things like generational theory and really unpacking that with someone, or they get really into discussing psychology and how the human mind works and neuroscience and things like that. But they don't really care so much about, I want to take apart my car engine and understand all the moving pieces. Whereas I know a lot of STPs who don't really care about understanding generational theory or these abstract concepts. They're more interested in understanding how an object works. So that's a big difference. But if you're looking for someone who can really tell you in depth how something works and who can troubleshoot with patience rather than just trying to rush to get a solution, then you want an introverted thinking type around. Unlike TJ types who can be very impatient in the rush to achieve something, TP types are much more patient with the process of learning all the pieces in order to get the most effective or most accurate results to a problem. So now we're going to move on to the feeling functions. Let's start with extroverted feeling, which is the process that ENFJs, ESFJs, INFJs, and ISFJs use. So extroverted feeling is all about interpersonal intelligence. It's all about reading the emotional dynamics of people and adjusting behavior in order to reach some kind of social cohesion. Extroverted feeling is really good at understanding how many different people feel and trying to get them to all work together. So an extroverted feeling type might walk into a meeting that's really tense and know how to crack just the perfect joke to diffuse the tension. They're often good at mediating conflicts, managing interpersonal needs, counseling people because they are good at creating a warm atmosphere, a welcoming vibe so that people feel comfortable communicating with them. They're good at self-disclosing just the right information to make someone else feel comfortable self-disclosing as well. Any kind of personal work or emotional intelligence fields, this often tends to be areas where extroverted feeling types really shine. So I've often seen them as event coordinators, HR workers, therapists, pastors, nonprofit leaders, executive coaches. There's so many ways that this can show up. When you're dealing with SFJs, they combine that interpersonal intelligence with a very practical, no nonsense side. These are the people who they're amazing party or wedding planners because they know what everyone wants emotionally, but they also are really good at working with the details to get them just right. With NFJs, you get someone who is very aware of people's emotions and really aware of how to create a warm, harmonious atmosphere, but you also get that introverted intuition, which is really good at reading between the lines, getting into other people's perspectives, and really reaching people on this almost spiritual plane. It's very empathic, and it's less about I could create the perfect wedding for you, and I could talk to you about why your marriage might not be satisfying you ultimately in the long run. So there's a very deep, soulful quality of the NFJ types, and there's a more pragmatic, down to earth quality of the SFJs. Next, let's talk about introverted feeling. Introverted feeling is all about staying true to your core values, regardless of what society expects. It's about understanding what makes us human at our core, rather than what society or our culture has conditioned us to be. Introverted feeling is very concerned with the human experience, with authenticity, with being true to yourself and not being hypocritical in any way, staying aligned with what ultimately matters. Introverted feeling types, INFPs, ISFPs, ENFPs, and ESFPs, they're always asking, why does this matter? Why is this important? Is this authentic? So they're really good at brushing past the trivial things in life that so many people get wrapped up in and zeroing in on things that are deeply important. This is especially true for the introverted feeling dominant types, like the INFPs and the ISFPs. These types refuse to compromise. At their best, they're the people like Joan of Arc who are willing to go down swinging for what they believe in, and they can make big social change by fighting for what they believe in, even when the whole rest of the world is like, we don't like that. That's not okay. They're the people who stick up for what they believe in. FJs, the extroverted feeling types, are really good at understanding how everyone else feels and creating social cohesion, interpersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence is much more about how you feel, being aware of your own emotional states and having self-awareness. Introverted feeling types have this intrapersonal intelligence, and it's beyond what you'll see in most other personality types. They have a self-awareness and self-understanding that goes really, really deep. They have a profound grasp of the human experience, and they're drawn to things that evoke that experience, that passion of the human experience. And because of that, they tend to write really moving fiction, or they create really profound screenplays, stories that aren't just shallow and amusing, but stories that really make you think about what it means to be human, what it means to have these variety of deep emotions like grief or melancholy or joy and elation, love. They get way deeper into the emotions and the fundamental human experience of life than many other types would. And so when you're listening to a song by an introverted feeling type, you might feel like, oh, wow, I never knew I felt this way. But now that I've heard this song, I suddenly understand they put words to some deeper feeling that I never had words for before. Or if you're reading a book written by an introverted feeling type, you might realize, oh, wow, I suddenly realize I relate to this character in this really deep, nuanced way that I never could have put into words before. Introverted feeling types are often the people who can find words for things or find some form of creative expression for a feeling that other types don't necessarily know how to verbalize. Because of this, introverted feeling types are often really strong when it comes to creative arts, whether that's writing, music, performing, storytelling, paintings, and creative art in that way. There's so many creative forms that introverted feeling types excel at. They also excel at therapy. They're good at helping a patient or a client really express the truth of their experience and their feelings in a very non-judgmental zone. Introverted feeling types are very good listeners. They're not interested in the surface level. They want to get to know where someone's at on a deeper fundamental level. Just as introverted thinking isn't so much interested in output as it is interested in understanding how something works, introverted feeling isn't so much concerned in the outer layer of emotion as what's going on deep down in someone's core. So you'll often find feeling perceiver types excelling in these creative fields, excelling in fields like counseling and psychology, as well as careers that just really tug on their particular causes. They're very cause driven. So you often find, I know an INFP who works as an environmental engineer, or another ISFP who works with conservation and going and teaching kids how to take care of the bees in their neighborhood or the wildflowers in their vicinity, things like that. So as you can see, there are many different types of intelligence that each of the 16 personality types can have. There isn't really one specific type that is smarter than all the other types unless you're using the word smart to only describe one specific type of intelligence. Like if your idea of smart is someone who asks really big, deep existential questions, then yeah, you're going to think that intuitives are smarter. But if you're someone who thinks of the word smart entails someone who can really find fast solutions in crisis situations, then you're probably going to think that sensing perceiver types are smarter. If you think smart means someone who can memorize the facts and use them in the future and use tried and true techniques to find solutions to problems, you're probably going to think SJs are smarter. If you're going to think smart means emotional intelligence and someone who can work with people and mediate disputes and have diplomatic relationships, then you're probably going to think an extroverted feeling type is smarter. So each type has its own level, its own style of intelligence. And part of what I love so much about writing about type or talking about it is being able to help people see these nuances and how each of them is beautiful in its own way. If you are not sure what your type of intelligence is, what your personality type is, I can help you with that. This is where I get into that part. I do type clarification sessions, and I also can do cognitive function deep dives if you know your personality type and you just wanting to understand how it works, what the cognitive functions are for your type, and ask questions, then go ahead and set up a session with me. I'll leave a link in the description. If you're not sure about your type and you want someone who can help walk you through it and help you to find that best fit type, I'd love to help you with that. It's the favorite part of my job. So I'll leave a link in the description. And also, if you want to know more about the types, I've written over 1,000 articles about the personality types on psychologyjunkie.com. So head on over there if you'd like to find out more. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.